On today's show, what started out as a slow game for the Capitals ended in a 6-3 victory.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about how the Capitals continue to keep rolling as they downed the Habs 6-3 in a game that was, well, a slow start. A big game. Wilson, Duhaime, Vrana, McMichael, Protas, and Ovechkin scored for the Caps, who beat the Habs 6-3. Ovechkin had 2 assists. Lindgren made 13 stops. Wilson ended the power play goal 6-game drought. There was a lot to love about the Capitals tonight. I'll talk about that. A little bit later, I'll talk about the young guys playing a huge role. Oftentimes when I reference the Capitals, I'm talking about Ovechkin, I'm talking about Carlson, players that have been here for quite some time, but it's a lot of the young guys on the team that are really stepping up and playing a huge role. Next, I'll talk about Ovechkin leading the way. Yes, a bit of a slow start, all things considered. Even a very short, slow start to the season is really chipping in and firing on all cylinders. What's behind that? But just to get it going here, talking about the Capitals as they continue to keep rolling and finding a way to win games that I'm going to say last year they may not have won. This was a somewhat uneventful start to the game midway through, and then in the third period, things picked up and kind of reminded me to a certain extent of the Capitals versus the Lightning game. But in what was initially, like I said, a pretty uneventful Halloween game, the game between the Caps and the Habs finally picked up some steam in the second period. And that is when the Capitals truly showed up to play. And this is a big win. With this win, the Caps improved to 7-2-0 for the season. Again, and I hate to keep, beating this like a dead horse, but this team is far exceeding expectations of what any of the insiders perceived was the case. I was watching an excerpt from the Spit and Chicklets podcast. They said the same thing, that, wow, this Capitals team is for real. And it's interesting that some of these people that might have panned this team earlier in the season are now singing their praises. But the momentum, that is definitely in this game what shifted in the second period. The first period was quiet. We know that, but everything changed big time in the second. There was a significant momentum swing after Alexei Protas, who has been huge for the Capitals, had that shorthanded goal disallowed. There was a lot of excitement, like, yeah, Protas, another one, but it was disallowed. Then the Caps, this was the back and forth, fell behind 2-1 after goals from Cole Caulfield on a power play and Brendan Gallagher. So, you take a look at the Habs team. It is a bit of an interesting team that a team that historically has done great things, but it has not been that dynasty or that really great team that maybe we think of years ago. But in all things, I think that team will ultimately pick it up in the second half of the season as well. In the previous 2 seasons, the biggest thing, this might have been doom and gloom for the Caps, but this year, the Capitals were quick to respond. And oftentimes I'm asked, what's the difference between this year's Capitals team versus last year's Capitals team? Well, that sort of just exemplifies this year's Capitals team, as they have that pushback that they didn't necessarily have last year. And why is that? Well, some of the younger guys that have stepped up on this team and the new additions of this team as well. Just a minute and 14 seconds after Gallagher's goal, Brandon Duhaime did a big thing and tied it up with his first goal as a Cap, followed by Jacob Vrana scoring 54 seconds later to put the Caps up 3-2. That's what I'm talking about. Brandon Duhaime in that fourth line has been clutch for the Capitals, and Jacob Vrana, who has been a bit quiet on the score sheet, lighting it up, and that is ultimately what we want to see from Jacob Vrana. But this game marks the 8th time in 9 games this season that Washington has scored at least 3 goals, and their offense seems to be clicking very well right now. And that's reassuring as we take a look at, there's those 2 losses that I like to reference. The first loss of the season to the Devils and then the game to the Lightning. And there's not a whole lot to complain about this team other than that, as they have been lights out for the most part. But this game in particular definitely was a back and forth battle. The Habs did manage to even things up again with a goal from Nick Suzuki heading into the third period. It was tied. So there was that part of me that's like, oh, they're pushing back. They're fighting really hard. Do they have what it takes? As it turns out in this game, the Capitals had the answer. And this was a tough game for the Caps as they were without the services of Jacob Chychrun and Matt Roy. It was a rough night defensively, but luckily, the offense stepped up big time in the third period to slam the door. But the defense, what did stand up there? TVR had a big role in this game, had 2 assists, and has now notched assists in 3 of his last 4 games, tying him with John Carlson for the most assists amongst defensemen this season. So, TVR is one of the guys that I kind of had circled as potentially not being on the Capitals this season. I thought potentially he could get traded, has been stepping up and playing a huge role for the team. But as well, Taylor Radish also getting in an assist, marking points in 3 of his last 4 games. So that's what I'm talking about. One of the biggest differences this year versus last year is scoring and contributions up and down the lineup. Dylan Strome continues to impress as well, adding 2 assists to lead the team with 13 points in 9 games. He's been a consistent presence with points in all but 1 game. So the Capitals were humming along in this game, and a fun game to watch, and a bit of a nail biter at points in the game as well. And another thing that stepped up was special teams. The Caps were relentless in the third period, spending a lot of time in the offensive zone, which is always a good thing, instead of the defensive zone, creating numerous chances and generating chances and opportunities, put a lot of pucks on the net. Good things will happen, but penalties were called on Duhaime and Wilson. The team had to set up on the penalty kill with Caulfield, Suzuki, and Hudson circling. So this team was put to its test. There were penalties out there, but the Capitals found a way to rise above, and they did just that with Protas making some crucial blocks to keep the Habs at bay, finishing the night with a solid 5 for 6 performance on the PK. So a good performance. And then the PK, talk about the power play as well. Before the game tonight, the Caps had been struggling with their power play, going through 6 consecutive games without scoring a single power play goal, and an awful 0 for 21 during that span of time. That changed things up again, putting Tom Wilson back on the top unit alongside PLD and Ovechkin, with Connor McMichael and John Carlson at the point. It paid off on their second PP attempt of the night, when Wilson, stepping up and doing what he does best, tipped an Ovechkin shot for that much needed goal. Finally breaking the drought after 22 failed PP attempts. So a lot of that. Okay, we can stop talking about it. The power play that's been quite horrible for the Caps this year. They got it done. This was Wilson's 6th goal of the season, and Ovi and Carlson huge. Both got assists, extending their point streaks respectively. So a great night for the Capitals as they continue to keep rolling. A lot to love about this team, and let's hope that it can keep going. Let's hope that Chychrun and Roy can come back to this team so they'll even be that much better. All right, so coming up here after the break, I'll talk about Alex Ovechkin leading the charge and getting closer and closer to catching Gretzky. I'll discuss next. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And that's one of the frustrating things for me is my favorite band comes to town or my team is playing, but I want to know what kind of tickets are available and what will the views of the stage or the field be. So Game Time does that. They take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team. Every day you can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And Alex Ovechkin is rolling right now. It's funny that the ceiling is set rather high. The expectations for the Great Eight are set very high. It was to start the season and there was a few games he didn't get a goal and they're like, oh, here we go again. Alex Ovechkin is off to this slow start. I remember this movie. I saw it last season when there was a lot of doubt. I had my doubt as well. I'm not trying to be a revisionist here that Alex Ovechkin got off to a slow start last season. And was it going to be a carbon copy this year? Is this going to be another season that Ovi gets off to a slow start? And is he going to be able to catch Gretzky this season? Those kind of things. I think that if, this first part of the season is any indicator, I think that Alex Ovechkin is going to be a lot more in the goal scoring department, assists as well. But I think that his offense is definitely going to take a notch up. And that was evident tonight as Alex Ovechkin leads the charge in a real turn of events, leading to a much more exciting game. After that slow first period, Ovi, he did what he does best, really stole the show with a 3-point night. So quite an evening for Ovi, while the younger guys like Protas and Connor McMichael also contributed significantly, helping the Capitals clinch this big 6-3 victory over the Habs. Some of the games are easier, some of the games are harder, but in any event, Alex Ovechkin has been absolutely huge. These last couple games in particular, I think that the page was really turned the last game against the Rangers when he picked up 2 goals. This night was a bit of a continuation of that. But all that being said, it's still about the watch and waiting for Ovechkin as he chips away at goal after goal after goal, getting closer and closer to the great one, Wayne Gretzky. Ovechkin added his career goal number 858, just 37 away from Wayne Gretzky, marking his third goal in 2 games. And, like John Carlson has said, like Tom Wilson has said, never doubt the big man. The big thing, of course, for Alex Ovechkin right now is that he can stay healthy. We have seen as he's gotten older that he is a bit more prone to being injured. He is this Russian machine that never breaks, but has shown certain fallibilities as he's gotten older. The big thing for him is to stay healthy. And then the unthinkable thing could happen. Again, to revisit my prediction for how many goals I thought he was going to get this season, I thought 35. But now, if he continues this pace, we might see him pass Gretzky later this season. Can you believe it, Capitals fans, that it could happen this season? And I'm all about it. Because if he can get it done this season, then we know he is under contract for one more season. And at that point, it's not over for Ovi. I still want him to go on a goal scoring rampage so that he can just make it so out of touch for any other younger player that it's going to be not in any of our lifetimes that it'll happen. I've heard certain names thrown out there. I've heard Austin Matthews as a potential younger guy. And then, of course, there's the younger guys in the league that we don't know ultimately what kind of goal scorers they're going to turn into. Bedard and Celebrini. And it seems like there's a lot of excitement around a lot of these younger players that what kind of goals are they going to put up? But it's changing. And Alex Ovechkin, I don't think in his wildest dreams when he first entered the league thought that he was going to catch Gretzky. And it's interesting that there is a support system going on there. And it's not Gretzky holding on to that record saying, no, we don't want Alex Ovechkin to catch me. What I have heard is he's actually been supportive of Alex Ovechkin. And if he ever goes through a drought or a slow period, that they will text or call Alex Ovechkin and say, hey, just don't think about it too much. It's going to happen, and supportive. And that is very mature and kind of unexpected, I guess, from a superstar. I think that a lot of these guys that have big egos would think to themselves, no, that's my record and I don't want anyone else to have it. I think that Gretzky has held on to that record for so long that you can't take away that accomplishment away from him. But Alex Ovechkin's time is coming. And again, like to reiterate what I've talked about on the show, that we'll be able to see it in our lifetime. Huge. So if you're Capitals fans out there, it could happen this season. But the big thing, like I said before, he needs to stay healthy and keep playing on that first line with Strome and Protas. That has been lights out for the grade 8 and chemistry. Chemistry is the big thing for a lot of players, almost any player, but Ovechkin, who had that for so many years with Nick Backstrom. I think that after Nick Backstrom stepped away from hockey, or, he was a bit diminished, I would say, the last season or season and a half that he was in the league, that he struggled to find that consistency and that chemistry, that if he can get it with a guy like Strome or at some point Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think that would be a good thing. And let's hope he can do it. Let's hope that truly great things can happen and he can catch the great one, Wayne Gretzky, this season. All right, so coming up here after the break, I'll talk about the young guys stepping up and playing a huge role for the Capitals. Who am I talking about? I'll discuss next. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And there is a lot of football that's played on any given Sunday or Monday or Thursday. And some of those games you're more into. Say it's the Ravens or say it's the Commanders, but say it's a weekend and your team's not playing. Or maybe it is and you wanted to make the games that much more interesting. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, all of those games got that much more exciting. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So one of the greatest things about the Capitals continuing to win games is I don't have to record these podcasts and talk to all of you about how the Capitals lost a game and what needs to change And don't get me wrong, that's going to happen at some point this season. Like in 24/7 Capitals Penguins, they said don't judge a team when it's playing its best or its worse. The season is prone to being ups and downs and ins and outs. I'm paraphrasing, but if you watch that series, you know what I'm talking about, that it's important not to judge the Capitals too much right now when they're playing very well, because inevitably that's going to change and things will slow up. And it's important not to judge a team too harshly with extreme highs and lows. But for right now, I'm happy about the winning. And ultimately, what is the secret sauce for the Capitals' success? Is it Alex Ovechkin? There's a pinch of that. Is it great goaltending? There's a pinch of that. But put it all together, put the young guys in there. I'm talking Protas, McMichael, these kind of guys, and stir it up, put it in a cake pan, 400 degrees in the oven for 20 minutes. It tastes so good. This Capitals team winning success is quite something. And the secret sauce is a bit spicy, so you'll want to have some milk on the ready. But this Capitals team is playing very well. The rising stars, McMichael and Protas. If you are a longtime listener and everydayer of the show, you know I spoke about 2 summers ago that it had to be the season for Connor McMichael last season, and it was. But what we have seen as his play grow by leaps and bounds this season, the new father and all that entails with a crying baby in the middle of the night and all of that, he's still up for the challenge. A young guy, they can handle it a lot better than us old guys that are parents. But I think that Connor McMichael has stepped up, and Alexei Protas, who I knew was going to be a good player at some point, is growing into his own and being that player that I think a lot of us had hoped for. Now, a lot of people still think that Alexei Protas is not fully realized his potential, as he has a huge frame, that if he added some physicality to his skill set, well, he could be a real dynamic next level player. But in particular, Connor McMichael and Alexei Protas have been standout players this season. The 1-2 punch on the 1 and 2 lines for the Capitals after having a potential shorthanded goal denied earlier in the game. That was a big thing. The rebound, they came back strong in the third period with McMichael. Yes, Connor McMichael sliding a rebound past the goalie to regain the lead 4-3. So in this game in particular, talking about these guys living out what I've talked about on the show, that they have been huge. McMichael on fire, racking up 9 points in his last 6 games. So Connor McMichael, if he is not a household name, if you are listening to this podcast and you're not a Capitals fan, circle him on your card of players to keep an eye on, and Alexei Protas as well, because not long after, Protas scored off a great setup from Ovi, pushing the lead to 2 goals. But Protas, too, has been on a roll with 5 points in his last 2 games. This young group of players, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. This group right here, it's enough. It's enough, and it's really great. But if you really want to push the hands on the side of your head because your head's going to pop, can you imagine how great this team is going to be with the likes of Andrew Crystal, Ryan Leonard, plus the likes of Connor McMichael, Alexei Protas, these kind of guys, plus having PLD under contract for the next 7 years, and Tom Wilson being the next captain of this team? This team could very well be lights out, untouchable for years to come. And again, I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I'm still happy with the fact that with Protas and McMichael, a lot of the other players that have stepped up, the new players that have come here, Duhaime coming on, Radish, these guys that some people said were depth moves, huge. And PLD, even though he is not finding the back of the net with any sort of regularity at all, he is that guy that is the playmaker and ultimately showing his worth. Got the great hockey IQ, moves the puck well, a great skater. The proof is in the pudding, as they say, as the Capitals keep rolling. Can they keep going? That is the hope going forward here, that the Capitals' positive momentum can keep going. Now, this is a team that won the game, and there were defensive lapses in this game because, well, the big names weren't there. I'm talking about Chychrun. I'm talking about Roy. They found a way to overcome. But we don't want to put this to the test too much. Ultimately, we know that Chychrun is day to day. Let's hope that day to day doesn't turn into week to week or anything worse than that. Because once, you take a look at it, once Chychrun is back, once Roy is back, this team will be next level. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals and making it your first listen of the day. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.